FabFilter just released ProQ4, so today we're going to take a look to see what's new and whether or not it's worth upgrading from ProQ3. What's up everybody, Mike here. ProQ has been one of my most used plugins since I first got version 2 back in 2016. So when FabFilter announced the new update, I was both excited but also wondering what could really be improved upon from ProQ3. But with new features including EQ Sketch, Saturations Mode, the Instance List, and of course Spectral Dynamics, I was once again intrigued. So let's check out these new features so you can decide whether or not the upgrade is worth it to you. So let's open up an instance of ProQ4 on our snare and dive in. First, we'll take a look at the EQ Sketch feature. By clicking this little pencil icon down here, it allows you to draw in an EQ curve. So for this snare, I'll start by drawing in a high pass filter, then a little bump around the fundamental, a bit of a mid-range dip, and finally a huge top end boost. And just like that, we have our basic EQ shape. And honestly, I don't know if I'll ever really use this feature myself. Like I guess if you get good at using the pencil tool and often find yourself needing a lot of bands, it can get you in the ballpark really quickly. But like, it's already so fast and easy to set up bands the normal way, and I would definitely need to go back and tweak all these bands anyway. So I don't know. Some people are probably gonna like this. And for those who don't, it's incredibly easy to ignore this feature. So I went ahead and tweaked the EQ to how I wanted it, but I've got quite a bit of cymbal bleed from this 20 decibel boost in the top end. So I'm going to lower that band until the bleed isn't too annoying, and then I'm going to add some upward expansion to this band by using the ring around the gain knob to increase the top end more only when the snare hits. So far, this is nothing new that you couldn't do in ProQ3, but what is new is if we click this little arrow icon, it opens up an expert tab where we now have attack and release controls for the dynamic bands. In ProQ3, the attack and release were program dependent, so they weren't just using some fixed value. They changed based on the input signal and what you were doing to it, using some super smart FabFilter under the hood goodies. And I really like this, because for most stuff, it just worked. But there were definitely some instances where a little more control is welcome. So now, if you leave the attack and release at their default 50%, it's doing exactly what ProQ3 was doing, but you can also tweak it if you need to. And you'll notice that the values are in percentages, not milliseconds, because again, these are still program dependent, not fixed values. So for our snare here, I'm gonna set the attack as fast as possible because we want it to boost that top end pretty much instantly once the snare hits. And then I'm going to speed up the release a bit too, to reduce the amount of cymbal sneaking through. Then we can dial this in even a little bit better with another new feature taken from Pro MB. You can see that the top end is obviously being boosted on the snare hits, but it's still being triggered a little bit by the cymbal bleed. In all honesty, I don't think it's really a problem on this particular track, but on a track where the bleed is worse, it definitely could be. So to fix it, we're going to click where it says band in the expert tab and choose free. This allows us to essentially set what the dynamic band is listening to and keying off of. So when it's set to the default band setting, that band, in this case covering from about 3K and up, is going to be triggering the expansion based on what's happening above 3K in our signal. But with the free option, we can move that. In this case, I'm going to move it down around the fundamental of the snare so that the cymbals won't affect it. And if you hit the little headphones icon, it'll solo what it's listening to help you dial it in. And just like in ProQ3, by default, the threshold is set automatically in a really clever way, which just works like 90% of the time. But if you need to adjust it, just drag down on this slider to set it manually. Now moving on to the feature that the majority of people are probably most excited about, Spectral Dynamics. If you're familiar with Soothe, it's kind of like FabFilter's take on that. If you're not familiar with Soothe, well, keep watching and you'll see what it does in a second. So here we've got some guitars that are sounding pretty good, but are maybe just a little bit harsh in the 2 to 3K area. To fix this, we can create a dynamic band in that area, but it's obviously going to pull that whole area down, making it sound dull, when it's really just a few tiny resonances that are causing the problem. So all you have to do is click this little icon above the gain knob to change that band to spectral mode. You can also turn Spectral Dynamics on when you first create the band by holding Shift and Option while clicking to form the band. So now it's just notching out those harsh resonant frequencies and leaving everything else alone. Then if we go into the Expert tab, we can once again adjust the attack and release, but we also have this spectral density slider. This basically affects how sharp or broad the cuts will be. Sliding it to the left will create fewer, broader cuts, while going to the right will make them much more narrow. I really like having this built into an EQ. For one, sometimes it's when you're boosting an area with EQ that you notice that it might need a little resonance suppression. So being able to do that all from within a single plugin is pretty cool. Or conversely, there have been a bunch of times where I would use Soothe to tame some of the harshness, but then needed an EQ afterwards to broadly bring some of that area back. Again, it's nice doing that without flipping back and forth between multiple plugins. Also worth mentioning, you can use the Spectral Dynamics to boost frequencies, not just cut. I'm not sure just how useful that would be, but I can maybe see it being cool for sound design stuff or something like that. Regardless, a cool extra feature to have. And an important note here. The Spectral Dynamics uses linear phase filters, which means it introduces latency when you turn it on. Like, a lot of latency. In this session, running at 48K, turning Spectral Dynamics on introduces about 5,000 samples of latency in the default mode. You can adjust that by changing the linear phase resolution at the bottom of the plugin, but even on the low setting, it's still about 3,000 samples at 48K. So not a feature you're going to use during tracking, and make sure you have delay compensation turned on before using this. Then the feature I totally didn't see coming is the addition of saturation modes. By clicking the character icon, you can choose between clean, subtle, and warm. Clean is, well, just what you'd expect from ProQ. Clean. Then subtle adds a little gentle saturation, similar to what you'd expect to get from using an analog EQ. And warm mode adds even more obvious tube style saturation. And these are again extremely program dependent and affected by the EQ moves you're doing. So it will become more and more saturated the more extreme your EQ boosts are. Then this feature is one of those that I didn't know I needed until I saw it. If you click on the track name at the bottom of the plugin here, it opens the instance list, allowing you to see and modify any and all instances of ProQ4 in your session. What's really cool about this is, let's say you're EQing your rhythm guitars, but as you do that, the lead guitar starts to get buried. Now you can go into the instance list and see and adjust both guitar EQs at the same time, which makes it way easier to work out any conflicting frequencies. To assist you even more with that, you can hit the collision reference button, which will then put a red overlay on all the other tracks, showing where there might be conflicts with the track you chose, allowing you to quickly work out any issues. Also, if you want to see 2 or 3 tracks at the same time, but they're not next to each other in this window, you can simply click their pin icons. Then click the pin icon at the top of the plugin, and it'll display just those tracks. Another cool feature in this window is the ability to copy and paste EQ curves from one track to another. Say you adjusted the EQ on a background vocal and want to make the same change on the rest of them. Just click this little arrow and select copy, then scroll to the track you want to apply it to and select paste. But yeah, I'm really excited to see how this whole instance list thing affects my workflow over time. Then they also added a new filter type to ProQ4, the all-pass filter. So an all-pass filter doesn't actually change the frequency response, but instead it rotates the phase 180 degrees at the frequency it's set to. So the curve you see on the screen is actually the phase response, not the EQ curve. The only use I know of for an all-pass filter is to fix certain phase problems. Like say you've got a mono mic on a drum kit, maybe something like a crotch mic or a really close room mic, and the snare is in phase with the overheads, but the kick is out. You could put an all-pass filter right at the fundamental frequency of the kick to flip the phase just in that area, but not affect the snare much. I'm sure there are other uses for these, and if you know some, please let me know in the comments, but that's all I'm really aware of. And finally, in ProQ4, they added continuously variable slopes. It's like before, you could choose 12 dB per octave or 18 or 24, but now you can go anywhere in between. To do that, go down here and click where it says 12 dB per octave or whatever it's currently set to, and then grab the slider and adjust it to whatever you want. This works on bells and shelves as well, not just high and low pass filters. I'll probably never use this myself. Like I've just never wished I could have a 14.3 decibel per octave slope. 12 was always fine for me. It kind of feels like one of those things that just looks cool on a plugin sales page, but I'm sure there are a lot of people out there who will really like this. And since they tucked this setting away a little bit, for the people like me who don't care, it won't get in our way at all. Like I will probably forget that it's even there over time. But yeah, lots of cool stuff in this update. Just the updates to the dynamics section was enough for me to buy the upgrade. But I'd be curious what you all think. Are you going to upgrade? Which features are you most excited about? Or are there any that you wish they added? Let me know in the comments. I'm genuinely curious to know. But anyway, thanks for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one.